In 1513, a man sits in a small farmhouse outside Florence, Italy, and writes the most dangerous book ever put on paper. He is writing it to get his job back. He had been the second most powerful man in the Florentine Republic, chief diplomatic advisor, the man who understood power better than anyone alive. Then the Medici family returned, threw out the Republic, and had him arrested, tortured, and exiled to a farm with no money and no influence, and nothing but time. So he writes. And what he writes, in a book he calls The Prince, is not a theory about power. It is a manual. A step-by-step, ruthlessly honest manual for how power actually works, how wealth actually moves, and why the people who win are almost never the ones playing by the rules everyone else was taught. He sends it to the Medici, hoping they will give him his job back. They ignore it. 500 years later, the most powerful people on earth are still using it. And most of the people those powerful people compete against have never read it. Today we are going through 5 rules Machiavelli wrote in that farmhouse. 5 rules that the wealthiest people in modern history have applied, sometimes consciously, sometimes without even knowing, to build the kind of wealth that does not disappear. By the end of this, you will understand something about money and power that most people spend their entire lives never being told. And you will understand why they were never told. Secret 1. It is better to be feared than loved. But Machiavelli was not talking about fear the way you think. He writes, "A prince who relies on the love of others for his security is in danger, because love is fragile. It depends on the other person's circumstances, their mood, their self-interest. But the fear of consequences, that is structural. It does not change with the weather." Most people read this and think Machiavelli is describing a tyrant. He is describing a system. Every serious negotiation in the history of business has operated on this exact principle. Not the fear of violence, the fear of consequences. The fear of what happens if the deal falls through. The fear of what happens if you make an enemy of this person. The fear of losing access to something you need. The modern billionaire who understood this better than almost anyone alive was Steve Jobs. Jobs was not loved inside Apple in the way that word is usually meant. He was demanding, exacting, and frequently impossible. Employees feared disappointing him in a way that was specific and structural. Not because he was cruel, but because his standards created consequences that were real and consistent. And what that fear produced was not misery. It produced the iPhone. The specific physical detail that captures this rule is a meeting room in 1997. Jobs walks in. The room is full of Apple's existing product line. He points at most of it and says, "This is garbage. We are canceling it." Everyone in the room knows he is right. Nobody had been willing to say it. The love of being liked had kept Apple producing average products for a decade. The fear of his standards cleared the table in one afternoon. You have been in rooms where everyone knows the truth and nobody says it. That silence is what Machiavelli was warning about. The billionaire who moves wealth is not always the one who is loved. He is the one whose standards create consequences that everyone in the room takes seriously. That is not cruelty. That is clarity. And clarity is worth more than kindness in a negotiation. Secret 2. Never rely on the goodwill of others for what you can control yourself. He writes, "A man who becomes powerful through the goodwill of others builds his house on sand. Because what others give, others can take away. The only power that is permanent is the power that comes from something you built and control yourself." This is the rule that every self-made fortune in modern history has operated on. And it is the rule that most people violate the moment they get comfortable. He gets a raise. He relaxes. He has one income stream, and it is working. And so he stops building anything else. And then the company restructures, or the industry changes, or the boss who liked him leaves, and suddenly the goodwill that was paying his bills is gone, and there is nothing underneath it. Jeff Bezos understood this rule at a level that most people find uncomfortable. Amazon was an online bookstore that kept building things nobody asked for. Warehousing, shipping infrastructure, cloud computing, a publishing arm, a streaming service. Every single one of these was Bezos refusing to rely on the goodwill of a single system. He was building things he controlled when the existing business was already working fine. Most people would have stopped. The specific detail that makes this rule real is a memo Bezos wrote to his shareholders in 1997, before most of the things that made Amazon enormous existed. He writes, "We will make bold investment decisions in pursuit of long-term market leadership rather than short-term profitability." He is telling his shareholders he is not going to rely on their goodwill either. He is building something he controls, and if they do not like it, they can sell their shares. Most of them did not sell. The people who stayed made 50 times their money in the next decade. The lesson is not that you should do what Bezos did. The lesson is that the people who built lasting wealth were almost always the ones building a second foundation while the first one was still holding. You feel safest when things are working. That feeling of safety is exactly when Machiavelli says you should be building. Secret 3. Appear one way, be another. He writes, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few feel what you actually are. And those few do not dare to oppose the many who have the protection of the state," which is another way of saying the protection of perception. This is the most uncomfortable rule in the book, and it is the one that the wealthiest people in modern history have used most consistently. Warren Buffett lives in the same house he bought in 1958. He drives a modest car. He eats McDonald's for breakfast. He gives folksy interviews about cherry Coke and simple investing and the wisdom of ordinary people. And from behind that image of the humble Nebraska grandfather, he has built one of the most ruthlessly strategic financial operations in the history of capitalism. Berkshire Hathaway has taken controlling positions in companies, reshaped industries, and accumulated wealth at a rate that the greatest minds in finance have spent decades trying to explain. He is not being dishonest. He is not performing something false. He is allowing people to see what they want to see. And what they want to see, the simple, wise grandfather, makes them comfortable in a way that is profoundly useful to him. Because comfortable people share information they would not share with someone who made them feel threatened. Because comfortable people underestimate you in negotiations. Because comfortable people root for you in a way they would not root for someone they perceived as a competitor. The specific detail is a famous story. A Wall Street analyst asks Buffett why he has not invested in technology. This is in the late 90s, when every investor on Earth is throwing money at tech stocks. He says he does not invest in things he does not understand. The analyst leaves the meeting thinking Buffett is behind the times. 3 years later, the dot-com bubble collapses, and Buffett's holdings are untouched. He understood technology perfectly. He understood the bubble perfectly. He simply did not see the benefit of explaining himself to someone who had already decided what to think of him. You have met people who are quieter than you expected and turned out to be more powerful than anyone in the room. That is not an accident. Secret 4. The slow accumulation of small advantages is more powerful than any single victory. He writes, "Small injuries are forgiven. Large injuries cannot be. Therefore, if you must act against someone's interests, do it completely, or better, do it through 100 small moves that they do not identify as a pattern until it is too late to respond." Machiavelli is describing compounding, not the financial concept, the strategic one. The idea that power, like money, accumulates through consistency across time more effectively than through any single dramatic act. The modern billionaire who understood this rule at its deepest level was John D. Rockefeller. Standard Oil did not dominate the American oil industry through one dramatic takeover. It did it through 100 small moves across 20 years. Buying one refinery at a time, negotiating one railroad discount at a time, eliminating one competitor at a time through price cuts so targeted they appeared to be normal market behavior until it was too late for anyone to respond. By the time anyone understood the pattern, Rockefeller controlled 90% of American oil refining. The specific detail is a negotiation tactic he used repeatedly. He would approach a competitor and offer to buy their refinery at a fair price. If they refused, he would cut prices in their market until they were losing money. Then he would approach them again, usually at a lower price, and they would sell. He did this not once, not 10 times. He did it to hundreds of companies. Each individual move looked like normal business. The pattern was the strategy. You are executing your own version of this every single day, either intentionally or not. Every skill you build is a small move. Every relationship you invest in is a small move. Every decision to reinvest rather than spend is a small move. The question is not whether you are making small moves. The question is whether they are pointing in the same direction. Secret 5. The man who adapts survives. The man who does not is destroyed by his own past success. He writes, "I believe it is better to be impulsive than cautious, because fortune is a woman, and if you want to master her, you must strike her and compel her. And she more often yields to men of this type than to cold calculators, because she is a friend to the young, for they are less cautious, more fierce, and command her with more audacity." This is the most misunderstood passage in the entire book. Machiavelli is not talking about recklessness. He is talking about the willingness to change when the world changes. Because the single thing that destroys more fortunes than any market crash, any bad investment, any single catastrophic decision, is the refusal to adapt. The attachment to what worked before. The assumption that what built the fortune will protect the fortune. Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975. They invented it, their own engineers, in their own lab, and they shelved it. Because Kodak was a film company, and film was making billions of dollars, and digital cameras would destroy the film business. They were right about the last part. Digital cameras did destroy the film business, including Kodak's. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The company that invented the technology that killed it had chosen its past over its future and paid with everything it had built. Elon Musk understood this rule in the opposite direction. When Tesla was in its worst years, running out of money, unable to meet production targets, publicly mocked by every serious analyst in the automotive industry, he made a decision that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. He bet the entire company on a production method nobody had proven could work. It was not a calculated risk in the conventional sense. It was the willingness to compel fortune, to strike rather than calculate. And it worked. The specific detail is a night in 2018. Tesla is weeks from bankruptcy. Musk is sleeping on the factory floor at the Fremont plant. He is personally overseeing production changes in real time. There are no bankers in that story, no board meeting, no strategic roadmap. Just a man who refused to be destroyed by caution. The difference between Kodak and Tesla is not intelligence or resources. It is the willingness to abandon what worked before when the world no longer needs what worked before. And now here is the truth that Machiavelli actually wrote the book to deliver. The truth that 500 years of readers have been avoiding because it is easier to argue about whether his rules are moral than to sit with what he was actually saying. Machiavelli did not write a book about power. He wrote a book about people. And the reason his rules still work 500 years later is not because the world has not changed. It is because people have not changed. The fear of loss, the desire for respect, the way humans mistake movement for progress and noise for strength. Those things were true in Florence in 1513. They are true in every boardroom and every bank account today. The question was never whether these rules work. The question is whether you are willing to use them. Most people are not. Not because the rules are wrong, because using them requires seeing the world as it is, rather than as you were told it should be. That is the hardest thing Machiavelli ever asked of anyone. And it is still the price of entry. Subscribe. Every video on this channel shows you the rules behind the world that most people were never taught. The next one goes even further.